So I received a great question after my last video. The question was, I understand the phrase, my body, my choice, but what about the rights of the baby who's going to be killed? Don't they have the same rights? To have this conversation, we need to discuss fetal development. So, get ready for a biology lesson. All pregnancies begin as two cells that divide. You might have heard the phrase, a clump of cells is not a baby. And this is what people are referring to. These cells develop from something that is unidentifiable from a human and slowly over time into something we recognize as a person. Scott Gilbert, a professor of biology, has identified 5 stages of development to try and pinpoint exactly what stage does human life begin. And in the end, there's no clear answer. The first stage is fertilization. This is when the sperm and egg meet in the fallopian tube. This is the start of what we call a zygote, which would be essentially the mashup of human genetic material. We do not consider this to be a fetus quite yet. To be clear though, almost every cell in everyone's body contains complete human DNA sequences. So Horda Sakar, professor of philosophy and integrative biology, said, if genetic material alone makes a potential human being, then when we shed skin cells, as we do all the time, we're serving potential human beings. During the first stage of the zygote, they actually contain double the amount of genes, one set from the sperm and the other from the egg. The second stage is gastrulation. This starts about 2 weeks after fertilization. This is where meiosis begins and the process of eliminating the extra genes and chromosomes we had at fertilization. This is a point where an embryo loses the ability to have identical twins, and the embryo becomes a biological individual. This is also where biological sexes and asexuality characteristics begin. The third possible stage is 24 to 27 weeks of pregnancy, when human-specific characteristics develop. This is where we see brainwave patterns start. Remember, when a person's brainwave pattern stops, they're legally dead. The fourth possible stage, which is the one that Roe versus Wade used to legalize abortion, is viability. When a fetus typically becomes viable outside the uterus with the help of available medical technology. And the final stage is birth. Now, I'm not here to argue personal value. I'm purely here to give facts. I do know, however, that this is not an argument of life, but more so as when exactly does a person become a person? The reality is that making abortion illegal is saying that a uterus owner's life is equal to that from the unborn child, or started at fertilization. That is the very first stage we talked about with the cells that have 2 sets of DNA. If this is the case, then I wonder why we haven't questioned the morality of stem cell research. The fact is that being human includes a lot more than just biology. I also know that pro-life propaganda is often misleading with images of fetuses with mismatched developmental stages. When you see pictures of fully developed babies, it's going to pull at many heartstrings. The reality is that most abortions are done pretty early on, and even before the overturn of Roe versus Wade, getting an abortion in the later trimesters was difficult to get approved and even more difficult for the pregnant person to decide to have. These abortions normally meant that the fetus was incredibly sick or the mother's life was in danger, which is super traumatizing. So, I cannot fully answer the question, what about the rights of the baby that's going to be killed? This is a question you need to consider your own personal values on. I understand for those of us that are parents, The idea of a child dying is the worst possible thing to imagine. Trust me, I know. I've actually lost a child, and I understand the pain firsthand. But I would like to challenge you to take a look at the situation from another angle. Take a look at your children and tell me, the children that are alive, the ones that are standing right in front of you, that their value is exactly the same as the cells that are not fully developed. Are you willing to sacrifice them for those cells that may or may not develop into something? This is the reality for a lot of people right now. Because making abortions illegal will only translate into more people dying. The complexities of the situation, in my opinion, is exactly why this should be a decision made at the personal level. Please keep your questions coming. And follow me for more information on reproductive justice and other sex education topics.